Hey, welcome to Brighter Rays. This week we're looking at Genesis 21, 22 through 34. 21, 22 through 34. I don't know why that's so hard to say, but it is. When we're looking at a study called The Everlasting God. We'll get to that, why it's called that in a little while, but first let's talk about what we saw in the previous chapter. Now in the previous chapter, we saw Abraham had moved his household to Gerar. Abimelech, the king of that area, took Sarah into his household because he believed that Sarah was an unmarried woman. Why did he think that? Because Abraham and Sarah used the same old line that they had used before, the line they came up with in Ur. Sarah was Abraham's sister. That's what they decided to do. They chose not to mention that she was also his wife. And as the story went, God intervened, corrected Abraham, and restored Sarah back to him. Then we read of the birth of Isaac. Sarah rejoices over the miraculous birth, and Abraham is once again obedient to God as he circumcises his son on the 8th day and gives him the name Isaac. Just as God had told him, right? So, about 5 years probably passed at the most, and the time for Isaac to wean from Sarah finally comes. Abraham throws a great party for the occasion, which brought really the mockery and scorn from Abraham's firstborn, Ishmael. Ishmael didn't like it. Ishmael knows what's going on, I think. I think Abraham has told Ishmael and Hagar that, Ishmael's not the one. That's what God said. So, Ishmael has a problem with Isaac, and that's what happens. So, Ishmael knows that he is not part of the covenant. He's been told that probably, I'm guessing. Doesn't say, but, it's been, 14 years, and now it's probably been close to like 17 years, 18 years that he's been, around that statement from God came. So, but anyway, Sarah witnesses what Ishmael's doing, mocking her son, and she tells Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away because Ishmael will not be a part of the covenant. He's not an heir with Isaac. God confirms this and tells Abraham it's right for him to break really the cultural norms and send Ishmael away. Abraham didn't have to worry though because God promised to take care of him. And that really brings us to our study, this text that we're looking at now, where we find Abimelech coming back into the scene. The previous stories I just mentioned are more well known, but I feel that our text that we're looking at in this study is probably unfamiliar to most people. It's not one of the popular stories of Abraham. I'm guessing your mind doesn't when you're thinking about Abraham, your mind doesn't just go right to this story. It doesn't immediately think of the story of Abraham's treaty with Abimelech. But before we get into the story, I want to make a little side note here about Abimelech. It's not the only Abimelech recorded in the Bible. So if you're going to start flipping through Scripture, you're going to see Abimelech's name several times. And it's not all the same guy. So don't get confused. There's multiple people called Abimelech. Now, if you see it's all the same guy, you're going to get confused. So that's not the same guy. Now, Abimelech is probably either a common name for people in that area, or it's a royal name that's passed on to different generations, or it's like a title, like the name Pharaoh. Pharaoh's a title. It's not the actual name of the person. So we see Abimelech here with Isaac several chapters later. So it's probably the same Abimelech in that one. The guy's an old man by now, but several chapters later on, we see Isaac goes to the same area and meets Abimelech, and then Phicol, who is Abimelech's chief of the army, is there too. So since those two names are there, guessing it's probably the same guy. So there is another Abimelech. There's one in the time of the judges. So by that time, it's got to be a different guy, unless this guy's living hundreds of years. And then there's another one in David's day, which is definitely a different guy. So In the text we have before us, I want to point out to you three main ideas. First, we're going to see the obviousness of God's blessing upon Abraham's life. Okay, it's obvious that God's blessing, and Abimelech notices that. Second, we find Abraham entering into a covenant with Abimelech and offering of an earnest money for the rights to a well. And then we'll finish up by looking at the fact that Abraham publicly worships God again. And that's when he calls God El Olam, or the everlasting God. So come back next time and we'll start looking at Genesis chapter 22 through 24 here, and we'll see what's going on with Abraham.